G'day everybody, my name is Lowell and welcome to the channel. So we have a reaction video for us today. This is going to be the US Coast Guard versus Navy. What is the actual difference? So we don't have a Coast Guard in Australia like you do in America. We have, I think it's called the Maritime Border Command. I think something like that, which works in conjunction with we have a volunteer Coast Guard who just do search and rescue. So they kind of work stuff out and they work together and whatever else, but it's not unified like in America. So we're going to have a look at US Coast Guard versus Navy. All right, let's jump in and let's have a look at this one.
The United States Navy and the United States Coast Guard. For anyone not in the know, they might be curious as to what the real difference is between the two services. After all, they both pretty much just operate out at sea, and they both use military caliber vessels. So what's the real difference between the two? And why do we even need a Coast Guard? Why doesn't the Navy just do both jobs itself? In 1790, the United States was facing a dire naval situation. Its shores were being regularly ravaged by pirate vessels, many of which were sponsored by Britain. In an attempt to protect its increasingly important overseas trade,
Bloody British, I tell you what.
The United States Congress authorized a proposal by the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, to build a fleet of 10 cutters. This date, August 4th, 1790, is officially recognized as the birthday of the United States Coast Guard. And within 3 years, the nascent Coast Guard, then known as the Revenue Cutter Service, had seen its first anti-piracy action. When war broke out with France in 1798, revenue cutters made up about 1/3 of the total U.S. fleet. Though incredibly, they ended up seizing 18 out of 20 vessels captured by the U.S. ships during the war. During the subsequent War of 1812, revenue cutters clashed with British vessels, and in one engagement, the crew of an ambushed American cutter fought so ferociously that the British captain of the attacking vessel returned the revenue cutter's sword to her captain in tribute to the skill of his fighting men. It wouldn't be until 1915 that the U.S. Coast Guard got its official namesake, when the Life-Saving Service, a system of patrol ships dispatched to rescue sailors in distress, and the Revenue Cutter Service were merged together into one service. On the 6th of April 1917, the U.S. declared war on Germany, and the Navy broadcasted Plan 1 Acknowledge to all Coast Guard bases and stations, officially transferring control of all U.S. Coast Guard assets to the U.S. Navy for the duration of the war. In support of the war, 6 Coast Guard cutters were dispatched to Europe for convoy escort duties, while smaller vessels patrolled the waters off the American coast in search for German subs. This would be mirrored 2 decades later when the U.S. Navy once more assumed control over the Coast Guard and its vessels. In both wars, Coast Guard ships defended convoys from German subs and suffered losses of ships and sailors in attacks. The U.S. Navy was officially established on October 13, 1775. Despite being outgunned by the mighty British Royal Navy, America has historically had a rich naval tradition, given the vast amount of trade it engages in with overseas powers. This meant that the rebel colonies had a rich pool of experienced sailors, captains, and shipbuilders, and in little time the first vessels of the Continental Navy were putting out to sea. Despite being overwhelmingly outgunned by superior British vessels, American captains nevertheless managed to secure several strategic wins, or turn British victories into Pyrrhic victories with little true value. After winning the Revolutionary War, the United States disbanded its navy as it could not afford to keep it financed. Without the funds to pay tribute to the Barbary states, the nations that made up the north coast of Africa, American ships were plundered by Barbary pirates. The situation only grew worse when in 1793 a truce was negotiated between Portugal and Algiers, which ended Portugal's blockade of the Strait of Gibraltar and allowed the Barbary pirates to escape the Mediterranean. As a result, 11 American vessels and their crews were captured and sold into slavery. This led the U.S. Congress to approve the Naval Act of 1794, which authorized the building of 6 frigates. In 1798, when war was declared on France, the U.S. Navy was officially re-established. After fending off French vessels during the war, the Barbary pirate states declared open war on the U.S. in 1801, when the U.S. refused to pay tribute. This led the U.S. Navy to conduct the first foreign conquest of an enemy state, battling Barbary ships in Tripoli and landing a contingent of American Marines to capture the city of Derna. During the War of 1812 against the British, the U.S. Navy found itself greatly outgunned and outnumbered by the Royal Navy. As a result, most of her best ships were blockaded in port, and many were captured by ground assaults and burned at the docks. Despite this, the U.S. Navy managed to capture several British ships, and even had a brief but highly successful campaign against British merchant ships in the Pacific. Key victories in the Great Lakes by the U.S. Navy denied the British several key strategic concessions during the negotiations for peace, and these victories ensured that the U.S. Navy would remain fully funded even after the war was over. At last, the United States would have a respectable and full-time Navy. During the American Civil War, the Union Navy completely dominated the Confederate Navy, and the blockade of southern ports proved devastating to the Confederacy, hasting along the end of the war. It would be this war, however, when the world would witness the effects of battle between two ironclads, new ships that were fully armored with metal plating for the first time. On March 9, 1862, the whole world acknowledged that wooden ships were officially obsolete, as Union and Confederate ironclads attacked each other while tearing through the wooden-hulled ships of both sides. The U.S. Navy would sadly decline until just prior to World War I, when it became the second most powerful navy in the world after the Royal Navy. With World War II, though, the U.S. surpassed the Royal Navy and officially became the most powerful navy on Earth. Today, the American Navy remains head and shoulders ahead of its nearest competitors and is matched by no other navy anywhere. So now that we know about the two services, just what is the difference between the two, really? Well, essentially both services have a similar but distinct job. The U.S. Coast Guard is America's primary enforcer of maritime law, a task that the U.S. Navy may occasionally assist with but does not actively partake in. The Coast Guard's civil duties are multiple, and they're responsible for their age-old tradition of maintaining lighthouses, buoys, and other navigational aids for civilian traffic. Although, admittedly, the only lighthouses in official operation today are automated. The Coast Guard routinely monitors ship traffic to ensure that all vessels of all sizes are obeying proper maritime rules and regulations. They also help keep traffic manageable at some of the world's busiest ports, as well as combat smuggling and illegal immigration by searching for stowaways or responding to a ship who's discovered them hidden on board. Famously, the U.S. Coast Guard is the primary deterrent to drug smuggling on the ocean and operates a fleet of about 200 cutters and smaller patrol craft to chase down suspects.
I guess you could call them they're almost like the maritime police, in that capacity, controlling, domestic waters and everything else like that, and obviously trying to combat drug smuggling and everything. Okay.
It's smugglers. Recently, a video of Coast Guard officers stopping a drug smuggling submarine has gone viral, and this is the job the Coasties do every day. The Coast Guard, however, is also responsible for responding to disasters at sea. When your ship is going down in rough waters and you desperately need help, it's the Coast Guard who will come to rescue the day. No matter what nationality you are, as long as you're in American waters, you have a guardian angel on your side, and that's a Coast Guard helicopter carrying rescue divers who have one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. However, in wartime, the Coast Guard can also be called upon to supplement the abilities of the U.S. Navy. While today its national security cutters aren't equipped with the heavy long-range firepower needed to take on most military vessels, they still pack a formidable wallop with a 57mm gun, a 20mm Phalanx Sea Whiz for close-range defense against drones, small boats and anti-ship missiles, and 4 50 caliber machine guns, and 4 7.62 caliber machine guns. The real strength of each cutter, though, is the robust suite of communications and intelligence sensors, which allow a ship to act as eyes and ears for Navy ships anywhere within their theater of operations. A national security cutter may lack the heavy firepower to go toe-to-toe with a modern warship, but it has everything it needs to target an enemy vessel and call in a strike from a friendly naval vessel. In essence, the U.S. Coast Guard is responsible for the coasts and various waterways of the United States. In a war, they can supplement the U.S. Navy and ensure that any enemy combatant entering or even approaching American territorial waters, or those of Canada or Mexico, is quickly engaged by nearby Navy vessels or land-based air power. The U.S. Navy's core mission is pretty much the exact opposite of the Coast Guard, and their primary wartime objective is to ensure that no enemy force ever sets foot on American soil. To achieve this, it operates the largest fleet of surface and subsurface vessels anywhere in the world, and the U.S. Navy on its own is more powerful than its next dozen competitors put together. A nation with a rich maritime tradition, the U.S. has long put an emphasis on a strong Navy, and it now sees the Navy as the primary peacekeeping tool in its toolbox. The U.S. Navy's real mission, however, is to ensure global stability and flow of free trade, figuring that as long as the world was busy trading with itself, it wouldn't want to go to war and disrupt lucrative trade with its neighbors. To this end, the American Navy has a global presence to help reassure weaker powers that their merchant vessels won't be harassed, whether by pirates or hostile foreign nations. Where once tribute was demanded of seagoing vessels by various rogue or national states, today the world enjoys global free trade thanks to the U.S. Navy and its NATO allies. To achieve its objectives, the U.S. Navy operates the largest force of aircraft carriers in the world, totaling at 10 Nimitz-class carriers and one of the brand new Gerald R. Ford class. The naval air power of the American Navy combined with that of the U.S. Marine Corps makes it the second largest air force in the world. These aircraft carriers are themselves supplemented by 9 amphibious assault ships, formerly known as amphibious assault carriers. These were typically helicopter carriers equipped with amphibious landing craft, but now sport vertical takeoff or short takeoff and landing aircraft. 10 amphibious transport docks can land hundreds of American troops at any time, anywhere in the world within days of hostilities breaking out. And a further 2 are under construction as tensions with China in the South Pacific rise. A further 12 dock landing ships supplements America's already prodigious amphibious forces. And given that the U.S. has total dominance in its own global hemisphere, it only makes sense that it places so much emphasis on having a Navy capable of conducting expeditionary amphibious landings. If you've seen our video on the United States versus the world, then you already know that it's exactly this lack of transport capability that would allow the U.S. Navy to fight the world's navies to a standstill and make an invasion of the Americas impossible. To knock enemy ships out of the water, though, the U.S. Navy has a fleet of 22 Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers, each armed with dozens of various types of missiles, ranging from fleet air defense to anti-ship and even dual purpose. The backbone of the Navy's surface power, however, comes from its fleet of 67 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and 2 Zumwalt stealth destroyers currently deployed. These ships do exactly as their name implies and are the heaviest surface combatants since the retirement of battleships by the world's navies. Prowling under the waves all around the world is the deadliest submarine fleet in the world, with 35 Los Angeles attack subs, 3 Seawolf-class subs, 15 Virginia-class subs, and 14 Ohio-class subs. While its anti-submarine capabilities severely atrophied after the end of the Cold War, the U.S. still fields the most advanced subs in the world and are considered just as stealthy as new diesel-electric subs being fielded today by smaller navies. Unlike diesel-electric subs, though, nuclear submarines offer a far greater endurance and allow the U.S. Navy to engage enemies far from home and threaten hostile fleets in their own territorial waters. The U.S. Coast Guard and the U.S. Navy could be seen as 2 branches on the same tree, but have markedly different mission sets. While both in peacetime and war, the services lend aid to each other and support each other's missions, ultimately the U.S. Navy is considered the bigger cousin, and it's likely that in another major conflict, the Coast Guard would once more fall under the Navy's jurisdiction. Which of the 2 services would you rather serve with? Have you ever served in either? Let us know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.
I guess the takeaway there is, you know, under the overall arching umbrella, they're basically the same, you know, the same thing. But when it's peacetime, you know, the Coast Guard break off and they kind of police the local waters, the domestic waters of America, where the Navy is kind of more on the bigger worldwide scale. You know, they're worrying about stuff like that. But okay, so as I said, you know, our Coast Guard, well, volunteer Coast Guard that we have here just do search and rescue. We certainly don't have guns and weapons and everything else on ours. As I said, you know, they're run by volunteer, you know, men and women that put their lives at risk, you know, rescuing people in the water. So, but you know, you see Coast Guards on movies. You see them if you've ever watched The Deadliest Catch. You've probably come across Coast Guard on that. It's just like, I don't know where they come from, what they do, but that kind of explains it a little bit more. You know, they are part of the military. They are kind of trained the same way. It's just they slightly do different jobs when it's peacetime, and when it's wartime, they all just kind of fall back into that same umbrella, you know, and then take on a different role, you know, more military direction. So that was very interesting, very interesting. But again, you know, being America, being situated where you are and everything else like that, I'm not surprised you've got a Coast Guard like that. So the threats coming, you know, thick and fast. But that was interesting. I wouldn't mind watching. I know we've done it with Delta Force, Marines. you know, a little bit of their training. You know, what do they go through? You know, you see those rescue divers and everything else, and they're jumping into the Bering Sea and stuff like that. And it's just like, that's some pretty scary stuff. That's some pretty scary stuff. I wouldn't mind having a look at some videos and the training and, you know, what they have to do and everything. So maybe for next time, we'll have a look at that. So let me know if you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for joining me today. Make sure you stay safe, and I'll definitely see you in the next reaction video. Oh, you're still here? You want more content? Why don't you check out my Patreon down here? You'll get plenty more content and some exclusive videos over there too. If not, why not check out this one over here?